Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Yesterday we had started discussing Hadith number 265 in the book of Sahih Muslim. This Hadith talks about instilling the feeling of responsibility in the hearts of human beings, and later on, as people go against the teachings of their Creator, what happens is that sense of responsibility is lifted and extracted from the hearts after it was instilled in the hearts. We read the beginning of the Hadith in Sahih Muslim. Today we'll continue. This Hadith is narrated by Hudayfa ibn al-Yaman. We only read the first sentence in the Hadith. إن الله أنزل الأمانة في جذر قلوب الرجال فعلموا من القرآن وعلموا من السنة. I will translate to you. This hadith is narrated by Hudayfa ibn al-Yaman, one of the major companions of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I just want to mention to you some of the virtues of Hudayfa ibn al-Yaman. In the Battle of Uhud, his father was killed by mistake by the Muslim army. And he tried to prevent them, and he was yelling, "This is my father," and they still killed him. And despite that, he had no grudge towards the Muslims, and he forgave them all for what happened. That's one of the virtues of Hudayfa ibn Iman. Another virtue is that the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to trust him with so many secrets. Even the names of the hypocrites at the time of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he told them about their names, who they are one by one. The real hypocrites, not the Muslims who do some actions that are conform with the actions of hypocrites, such as lying or things like this, or betraying. These are actions of hypocrites. But a real hypocrite, a hypocrite in belief, is the one who does not believe in Islam but pretends to be a Muslim. So he knew their names. And one of the strangest things you could read is that Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, during his lifetime, he had a close relationship with Hudayfa. Umar Khattab was the ruler of the Muslims, and he appointed Hudayfa ibn al-Yaman as the ruler in a place called Al-Madain, which is in Persia, which is in Iran today. And he used to frequently ask him, subhanAllah, that's very strange, he used to frequently ask him, "Asammani laka Rasulullah?" The meaning is that, did the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam give my name to you amongst the hypocrites? He used to ask him multiple times, subhanAllah, "Asammani laka Rasulullah?" It's an unbelievable statement. And although Umar ibn Khattab was overlooking and had an oversight over the Sahaba, and he used to, when he appoints somebody as a ruler, he doesn't just appoint them and leave them. He used to keep an eye on them. I'll show you. Like one of the stories is that he sent him to rule this city called Al-Madain, and then he called him back. And as he was coming back, Umar ibn Khattab awaited for him. When he heard he's almost arriving, awaited outside of the city to see him as he was coming, to see if he's having any goods with him or any wealth that he accumulated during his rulership in Al-Madain. And he found that he came back in the same manner that he had left years ago. Nothing with him more. Actually, when Hudayfa went to Al-Madain, he said to them, he read to the people the letter that Umar Khattab sent with him, that he's going to be the ruler. And they said to him, "Okay, so what do you want of us?" He says, "All I want is for you to provide me for food for myself and food for my donkey. That's all I want from you," subhanAllah. And he went back, and he was in the same manner that he left. And that is why Umar Khattab, when he saw him coming back with nothing more than he left with, he actually التزمه, he hugged him, and he said to him, "Anta akhi wa ana akhuk," which means you are my brother and I'm your brother. When he came at the time of his death, which was either they said 35 after Hijrah or 36 after the migration of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, after the death of Uthman ibn Affan by about 40 nights. He became very sick, and they came to visit him, and that was just before Fajr time. He became very sick at night. Then he said to the people, "What time is it?" They said to him, "It is the last part of the night." Then he says, "A'udhu billahi min sabahin il nar." The meaning is that I ask Allah for protection and refuge from a morning that leads to the fire of hell. Subhanallah, like he's shivering. Yani, although he's such a high level of piety, he says, I don't want to be this to be my destiny, that I wake up in the fire of hell. Subhanallah. A'udhu billahi min sabahin, a morning of the fire of hell. A'udhu billahi min sabahin ila nar. And then he asked the people, he says, "Aji'tum bima ukaffanu bih?" Did you bring something for my shroud? He says, they said yes. He says, "La tughalu fil akfan." He says, don't make it expensive. فإنه إن يكن لي عند الله خير بدلت به خيرا منه. He says, if Allah sees any goodness in me, then Allah will give me much better than this shroud. So do not make it expensive. It's not going to last with me for too long. If Allah sees, he says, إن يكن لي عند الله خير, if there's any goodness in me, Allah will give me a much better one. He says, وإن كانت الأخرى, and if it was otherwise, سلبته سلبا سريعا. It will burn quickly. You follow? Subhanallah, very pious man. So the hadith says, let me read the hadith to you. إن الأمانة نزلت في جذر قلوب الرجال ثم نزل القرآن فعلموا من القرآن وعلموا من السنة. This is what we read yesterday. Just to summarize, الأمانة means trustworthiness. It's basically this internal feeling of the obligation to preserve whatever you are entrusted with, to look after it and not to neglect it, and to give it back in the same manner that you were entrusted with, or to do whatever you are told with it according to the commandments or the advice from the rightful owner. This is the amana. And this is an internal feeling that is in every human being Allah has placed. Just like the fitrah, this is an instinct. And this is the meaning of this hadith, that it was instilled into the roots of human beings. And even people who have neglected the amana, and like for instance, they are dishonest, they're treacherous in their behavior and so on, they become like this after going against that internal feeling repeatedly and insistently. That's when they lose the feeling on this obligation to do what is right. As the more they do go against what is right, against the truth, against justice, against honesty, the more it becomes easier for them to do it, and then becomes a habit. There becomes an internal, like a fixed internal feature of that person. This is how a person changes the fitrah. كل مولود يولد على الفطرة. Everyone is born opposite to that. Everyone is born even like a child. You find a child, if he does something wrong, he goes and hides, and he feels that he's done something wrong. It's internal inside us. But if he grows up and gets used to stealing, then he will find an enjoyment. He will find an elation whenever he steals and makes unlawful money, right? You see these bank robbers, when they get away from the police, oh, they're happy and they're dividing the money. But initially, when they were children, when they had the righteous fitrah inside them, they would never do something wrong. And if they did it, immediately they will, if you caught them, they might cry, they might feel afraid, and so on. Now, ثم نزل القرآن فعلموا من القرآن وعلموا من السنة. Basically, the Quran and the Sunnah come and reinforce, give us the commandments as to how to preserve what is right, and how to continue to be honest, how to continue to be just, how to continue to be righteous, and it warns us from the opposite. So the only way a person can preserve this amana, this feeling inside him, is to follow the commandments of Allah and avoid the prohibition. This way, the heart remains sound. This is the only way the heart remains sound. نزل في جذر قلوب الرجال ثم نزل القرآن. When the Quran was revealed, they learned the Quran and they learned the Sunnah. And we talked a little bit about this point yesterday, that when the Quran was revealed, they learned the Quran but not only the Quran. They learn the Quran and they learn the Sunnah. Because you cannot understand the deen correctly just by learning the Quran. Otherwise, Allah could have just given us the book without the messenger. But Allah gave us the book and sent down the messenger to explain it and show us how to apply it. So we have to honor everything that comes from the messenger, which we know is authentic. And that's mentioned in multiple verses. I mentioned a verse yesterday to you, but other verses, you see this repeated. That the Quran tells us that we are supposed to learn more than the Quran. Allah says, وَاذْكُرْنَ مَا يُتْلَى فِي بُيُوتِكُنَّ مِنْ آيَاتِ اللَّهِ وَالْحِكْمَةِ. Allah is talking to the wives of the messenger to teach other people, because they're living with the messenger, so they're exposed to more teaching. So Allah commands them to go out and teach. What should they teach? وَاذْكُرْنَ, remind the people, مَا يُتْلَى فِي بُيُوتِكُنَّ, what is recited in your house, what is taught in your house, مِنْ آيَاتِ اللَّهِ وَالْحِكْمَةِ. Ayat Allah is what? Ayat, Quran, right? And the hikmah, the teachings of the Prophet, the wisdom, because what else is recited in their houses? If it is not the Quran and the sayings of the Prophet, that's the only thing that they are taught in their house. Whatever the Prophet recites from the Quran, whatever he says from his sayings. So we have to understand that the word hikmah here, that is recited in the houses of the wives of the Prophet, there's nobody else teaching there but the Messenger ﷺ. We have to understand. And in other verses, such as هو الذي أرسل ربنا وابعث فيهم رسولا منهم يتلو عليهم آياتك. Ibrahim alayhi salam is making this dua. Oh Allah, send amongst them ربنا وابعث فيهم رسولا منهم, a messenger from amongst them, منهم, يتلو, to recite, عليهم, upon them, آياتك, to recite to them the ayat. Is that his only job? Just to recite the ayat? What the completion of the verse? يتلو عليهم آياتك ويعلمهم الكتاب والحكمة ويزكيهم. All these are functions of the messenger. People who want us just to learn the Quran alone and nothing else, they've only taken this part of this verse. Actually, they have gone against the Quran itself. The Quran says that Allah will send the messenger. Even the messenger says, "Ana da'watu Abi Ibrahim." I am the manifestation of this dua that Ibrahim made. يَتْلُ عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِكَ. He will recite the ayat, the verses of the Quran. وَيُعَلِّمُهُمْ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةِ. And he will teach them. يُعَلِّمُهُمْ الْكِتَابَ. See, he says he will teach them the book. But didn't he just recite the book? So what does it mean to teach them the book? You follow? يَتْلُ عَلَيْهِمْ means he recites the book. وَيُعَلِّمُهُمْ means يُعَلِّم, give ilm, give knowledge. Give them the knowledge of the book. You follow? يَتْلُ وَيُعَلِّمُهُمْ الكتاب, the book of Allah, والحكمة, and he teaches them something else called al-hikmah, his own wisdom. That's the wisdom of the Messenger ﷺ himself, right? So there's his teaching of the Quran, how he explains the Quran, that's another thing that's part of the Sunnah, right? We don't find the teachings of the Messenger ﷺ of the Quran except in the Sunnah. And then we don't find the hikmah of the Messenger, his wisdom, his own wisdom, his understanding of the deen, and then he says it. Okay, so now if we find a knowledgeable scholar, we seek after him, we try to search for him, we try to learn what he says, look for his books, right? And people want us to leave the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ himself. Yani. It's amazing. Yani. So if we find somebody explaining the Quran or teaching us the deen because he has comprehensively understood the deen, that's a treasure, right? And that's the job of the Messenger ﷺ. يعلمه الكتابة والحكمة ويزكيه means to purify them. How does the Messenger ﷺ purify the people? Yani, to purify people, you don't take the person and wash him with water. How do you purify the person? By ta'lim, right? By admonition and teaching and giving advice. So they want us to take away all these things from the deen and just yatlu alim, you just recite the Quran to me. Don't tell me anything else. So that's a very wrong approach to the deen. There's just so much to be said about this point, but I wanted to stress upon it because yani, it's become a trend nowadays. People say, oh, where is it in the Quran? Where is it in the Quran? And who are you going to understand the Quran? You can see how much the verses, one verse has so much knowledge, that it requires hundreds of scholars over 1400 years and more till the day of judgment just to bring out all the pearls that are contained in one ayah. So one person, me or you, can understand the Quran and live by it. The person who says that is deceiving himself. SubhanAllah, we'll stop here because we've gone for 14 minutes. I don't want to make it too long. We'll continue some other time. Now.